So as you can tell by the title, and if you saw the end of part 1, even though I did get the spoon, we know where this is going. But still, by game 1, it's going better than my expectations that I had set. So for my first tournament, I didn't want to get a 0-0-0. And I'm already on 1 victory point, so that's already a success. On to game 2, Divide and Conquer, against Ross and his Mordor army, which I immediately noticed when he came up into the gaming loft because it had one of these big boys in it. So while we're getting set up, I had to ask,
who is your daddy and what does he do?
He had his hero stat profiles printed out, so I had a read of the Great Beast of Gorgoroth, and after pretending I understood it more than I did, I gave it back. Deployment in this scenario was in the corners, which meant walking to and from and around the table for a few turns of the initial movement phases. There was also 3 objectives to place, and we used my objective markers. Measuring up for the centerline placements, we noticed that the 2 side objectives would mean that they were splash bang in the middle of the water. So we did the slightest of shimmies so they could be mostly on land, so it weren't just my guys spectral walking around them. So unlike game 1, I actually took some photos of these games. With the first few turns of just movement, my Riders of the Dead rode ahead to secure the 3 objectives. I sunk a lot of points into having all 7 of my riders, but I think it was well worth it, for the fun and manoeuvrability. These 2 going for the main centre objective, one of them being Eomer of the Dead, were the first to secure it and with their high defence hold the position. But the next round of shooting from the 10 archers on the Great Beast, going both high and low, meant his horse was killed, but he survived, and didn't roll a 1, so at least he didn't land flat on his face. But once he was up, it was him now standing next to his buddy who still had a horse. In that moment, I decided that he was pissed off, because he couldn't get to the archers for revenge, so alone he charged into the incoming warband. His rampage lasted 4 turns of combat, of killing orcs until he was taken down. So how most of the turns went repeated the same kind of process. Shoot and mostly hit but not wound, and in the combats, they fail to charge, or if they do charge and attack, they miss, and in both those scenarios, their spear support behind them shows them how it's done. So rolling 10 dice at once would be fun, but not against the high defense 8, where those 6s don't mean anything if the dice don't follow up afterwards. And again with their shooting, I got lucky, and it mostly didn't happen. With cavalry securing the objectives and the rest of my army joining them, I thought it better to hold the objectives and have them charge me with a courage check and hopefully fail a good amount of them. I maintained a 3-inch bubble on the centre objective with a wall of high defence and terror checks. Until the last few turns though. But the left objectives were the first to fall, with Shagrat demolishing them in the combats. And when the Great Beast came in, trying to stampede my Herald, and eventually squashing him, that objective was over, with the numbers overwhelmingly outnumbering any one of my models who were still there. The other side lasted the longest, seeing no combat, though that could have been different if I hadn't got 2 Riders of the Dead keeping his Warg Riders at bay, and maintaining a beef for the rest of the game, which I'm sad to say they lost on the final turn with them killing one of the riders and the survivor not being able to avenge his beef buddy. After many turns of not being able to pass courage checks and charge, Ross's dice knocked it up a notch and we broke through my objective marker defensive positions on the centre, and with a killing spree of good dice rolls, and as you can see in a few turns, a lot changed. With my force now broken and with just over 1 minute remaining, would the game end on our terms with a 1 or a 2, or on the game clock? And with what is usually a rare occasion, he rolled a 1 and the game ended. With him securing the main and left objective after the massacre of my ghosts, a wound on my leader and breaking my army, the game score was 6 to my 2. for another major loss and another really fun game. Now on to the next game with another lucky pairing against another low courage army. For game 3, capture and control against Elliot's Warrior army. With my deployment, I've been wanting to try having them in a longer thin line without spear support against a low courage army, like these Warrior goblins. With the Harbinger of Evil, I'll be wounding with freeze. For some sweet goblin slaying. But this wasn't just a normal warrior horde of goblins. Yep, along with Elliot's awesome Durin's Door display board came the Watcher in the Water, which changed things. But I still stuck with my plan. The goblins led by Durburs and Groblog led by example and with their higher courage eventually charged in. With his goblins courage down to 1, there was a few turns of a standoff of failed courage checks. But he was getting really close, and if it wasn't the -1, a lot of them he would have passed. But fail he did, which isn't the funnest. And with the king now engaged with Groblog and not wanting to be a pain in the ass just having him roll courage checks, I charged in because the Watcher was in range now, so if I'm going to get whacked with a tentacle, I might as well be in combat and take some goblins out before that. And tentacle he did, mostly rolling 6s for a max output of tentacle thwacking. Luckily with my high defense, he couldn't wound. But that was no comfort because then they're dragged into base contact. My lines were massacred and one by one dragged in and then killed in the combat phase. The left flank however went much better against Drurzag and his fell wargs and spiders, charging towards my riders for that left objective. With my charge bonuses and knocking them prone, my riders were taking them out, although Drurzag's fury made it tougher, and just in case I slowly sent over a small contingent from the right flank, though I can't actually remember if they were needed in the end, but the left objective was held by a rider and the rear one by 2 warriors. I sent 2 riders round back to get the one on his side. Before the game had started and the centre objective was on the tower, I knew I wasn't going for it. He had a bat swarm who could fly up there, and I wasn't going to risk failing any climb rolls. With the Watcher's epic killing spree, my force was broken, and we rolled to see if the game ended. And again, on the rare occasion, it ended on the first roll. I held 3 objectives. Luckily, even with the killing spree on the right, a rider maintained base contact with the objective. The one on his side had both of our models on, so remained neutral. He had the tower objective with a goblin who climbed up there, and points for breaking me and killing my leader, leading to a minor win for me of 6-4. But if the game hadn't ended there, and with half an hour still on the clock to go and a majority of his horde alive, it wouldn't have ended like that. Using the rest of the time to look at the other tables and the armies for the best painted vote, I technically did a quick bit of vlogging. I also freed my army from their magnetized prison and got my display board out the bag and had them properly out. It was then on to the awards, and as you know, with 2 major losses and a minor win, I got the spoon. I was 3 victory points from a second to last, which ain't too bad, and it could have been much different if in game 1 I managed to kill just 1 more Uruk to break him. But I surpassed my goal of not getting no victory points at all, with some luck and dare I say it, some tactical decisions. I still played to the scenario objectives and didn't get 0-0-0, instead surpassing my albeit low goal with a 1, 2 and a 6. It was great finally playing in a tournament, and once the nerves had subsided in game 2 it was much better, and it was great hanging and chatting with the other players. I can't wait to do it all again in Bristol in September, where more than likely my nerves will reset and I'll go through it all over again. Who knows, I might even get the tripod out. Until then, thanks for watching, thanks to Kirton Games and the tournament organisers, and the fellow players, especially Craig, Ross and Elliot. And now on to the normal stuff. Like, if you haven't already, helps a lot. Comment down below, let me know what you've done with your recent tournaments. How do you think I did? And of course, and as always, subscribe. And if you like what I'm doing here, if you like the channel, share it with any fellow hobbits or those who dwell in Middle Earth. See you on the next one.
It's quite cool.